Welcome, listeners. I'm Miles Taylor, your host and the creator behind the Unspoken of Wall Street podcast. Join me as I sit down with remarkable minority leaders in the business world, peeling back the layers to discover the keys to their success in a fiercely competitive landscape. So lean in and savor the stories that often go untold. Enjoy. In this episode, Gordon shares his unique journey from a bicultural upbringing in Central California to becoming a CFO at a thriving Walnut company. He will discuss his experiences working in high tech and becoming a startup veteran and the valuable lessons he learned along the way. Hear what Gordon has to say about the true meaning of PhD. Enjoy. Gordon, welcome. Excited to have you on.
Thank you. Me too.
I think it'd be great if you give the listeners a quick summary of your bio.
Sure. So I'm just a kid from Reedley, California. I know people think of California as nothing but beaches and mountains and stuff, but I'm a grew up in the Central Valley, which is very rural. The rural parts, all the farming, all the agriculture. Grew up there. Did come from a lot of money. My dad was a forklift driver. My mom was a retail worker at a retail store and went to junior college. Well, I graduated high school, went to junior college, and basically worked my way up. Went to junior college first, then I went to San Jose State, moved away from home, and from there worked in high tech right out of school, and just kind of worked my way, figuring things out, and one step at a time, as they say, right?
Yeah, that's awesome. First, tell me about your college years. I just want to hear, were you doing internships? What'd you study? Just give me a quick
Sure.
synopsis of your college career.
Sure. Honestly, I started at junior college. I thought I was going to be a pharmacist at first.
Really?
And and I had a lot of, group sessions that I really enjoyed
Mhm.
working with my peers and friends at junior college in terms of our labs and whatever. And then when I transferred to San Jose State, I realized that I didn't like labs. I didn't want to be in a 5-hour lab every day. Had a soul search and figure out what did I want to do or what did I want to study and major in, and found accounting. I had working in or going to school in Silicon Valley, which is where San Jose is. A lot of our teachers at night were professors that worked at HP or Apple, a lot of the high tech firms, Cisco Systems, what have you. And one of the teachers there was a accountant that worked for HP, and he was advising. I worked at Arthur Andersen, went to work for HP, and kind of preached the word of accounting and going into consulting and financial understanding. And I caught the bug. I listened, I researched it a little, and found out that, wow, that's something I could do. I have my natural ability and instincts is talking. I'm meeting you, met you on vacation.
Yeah.
So the financial side of it, never really thought about it, but it was analytical, like the sciences that I was studying before. But I jumped into it in my first accounting class and thought, wow, this is what I want to do. Not necessarily the tactical side of it, but more the
Yeah.
analytical side. Once I
Yeah.
got into analytics and stuff, I was like, wow, I could actually read something and understand what's happening, and I can teach people, right?
Yeah.
Or consult with them and show them what I see, essentially.
Yeah. Exactly. And so this professor, was he kind of like a role model to you? Was he the
Yeah, I'd
Mhm.
ask them a lot of questions, right? I after class, and I was what, 21 when I realized, like 2021 when I realized I wanted to change majors. So I was just like a wealth of a sponge, right? I was just willing to learn and understand and ask questions. I wasn't scared to ask questions at that time. When I was younger, I probably was. But as I got older, I learned that, hey, if I want to go get it, I need to ask it.
Yeah. 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 I like it.
So,
So your career
yeah.
in finance, I know you're a leader now. So you kind of talk to me about some key qualities that you see in becoming a successful leader in this industry.
Yeah, one of the things I've learned a lot is, you got to put your nose to the grind, right? And in doing so, you got to learn. And
Yeah.
once you learn, you can't be that guy that's thinks you have all the answers. You
Yeah.
got to pull those answers from other people, and part of that is being a listener.
Right.
um, Good listening skills, knowing when to ask at certain times and knowing when not to ask at certain times.
Right.
My belief is, I'm never the smartest guy in the room, but I'm eager to learn from others to then apply it for my own means per se. Yeah.
And have you faced any, was there like a particular like moment or challenge that you faced while learning these qualities that kind of shape your perspective?
You know, uh, about several years ago, I was working for a company. I was a VP finance,
Yeah.
CFO, and we'll talk about that a little more
Yeah.
because I feel like I suffer from imposter syndrome. I think,
Yeah.
especially early in my career, I got into these roles that I'm like, man, what am I doing? Why am I here? But
Yeah.
then, good things come, right? Because I put my head
Yeah.
to the ground and I work it, I figure it out, and I take the time to learn my job as well as go above and beyond. But for me, it's I had worked for a company for 12 years, VP. Then we decided to move it, or we sold it and move it to North Carolina from California. I was doing dual duties. I was working in North Carolina 1 week out of every month, but
Oh, wow.
traveling. Yeah, I've missed Super Bowls, I've missed birthday parties and what have you.
Yeah.
So, but that's what comes with the hard work, right?
Right.
Um, but in doing so, that company, 12 years working in, we sold it, and I was trying to figure out what am I going to do now, right?
Right.
Do I want to stay in accounting? Do I want to do something different? Do I want to be my own owner of a business?
Mhm.
And I decided, you know what, I'm going to go work at Gallo Wines. So moving over there, I was a senior manager. So here I was a VP, basically a CFO at that business.
Yeah.
Um, and now I'm taking a step down because it's a billion-dollar company. So I had
Right.
to, but I wanted to learn. I wanted to learn from the best. So for me, I had to kind of check my ego at the door and see how they do things. How do they put together a business plan, right? So
Right.
I did that. So I did that for 3 years. I think maybe 3 years, and I realized that, hey, I can do this. I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and just learning their financial modeling
Right.
and presenting with our waterfalls and showing, why did we lose this month and what can
Right.
we do to improve the business, and then working with my key business leaders. But in doing so, I gained confidence again. I kind of it just reinforced that I do have the skill set, I do have the knowledge and the understanding. Part of it, as you know, in finance is trying to see around corners, trying to
Exactly.
anticipate.
Exactly.
And so basically, what I'm saying is I had to step down to step up,
Right.
and that I think made me a little more humbler, a little more uh, happier, that yeah, a little more confidence in myself. So.
Got you. And then what were some of those lessons learned working there in those 12 years?
Well, first of all, you're working, it's a billion-dollar company and
Right.
you work in healthcare, so you work with multiple people.
Right.
And so the business I came from wasn't necessarily small, but it wasn't big either.
Yeah.
So I had to learn how to motivate people, how to convince them to see what I see. What can we do better?
Mhm.
By looking at the numbers and just working with them. For a while, I was used to working with private ownerships. Now I'm working in not necessarily a private public company, but a private company. But that was huge
Yeah.
in trying to get from CEO, CFO to directors all on the same page and get
Right.
them to understand, what's our next steps and why.
Right. Right. And what's
Yeah.
motivated you? Because I know that's hard, taking a step down to take a step up. Like, what motivated you to keep going?
I was thinking about this. What motivates me. I don't know if you read Andy Grove's book. He was the founder of Intel, where only the paranoid survive, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a little part of me. I don't want to fail. I don't. I want to always look ahead rather than look back.
Yeah.
Um, so being that little fear gives me
Okay.
that little edge to go that little extra.
Yeah.
Because the last thing I want to do is fail. And the last thing I want to do is fail my family, myself, particularly myself, because I always gamble on myself. I will say that. I always figure, I get in these situations where yeah, I could do that. And then I go and I'm scared as hell, right? Like everybody
Yeah.
else. But then I figure it out and go, and then once I figure it out, that's one of the lessons I think I try to imply is using some psychology, right? How to
Right.
motivate team, how to motivate people, and getting people on the same page. I really feel like, if I can paint the picture that we're fighting for something, and if you're with me, we're all going to do this together. I seem to get a lot of buy-in, and
Yeah.
for me, that's what I learned at Gallo or G3, I guess the company name. But it's just one of those things where that's what drives me. The
Yeah.
fear then turns into confidence, then turns into okay, let's go.
Yeah. And what were these companies? What were y'all doing at these companies?
Well, I started in high tech, and in high tech, I was in accounting. I started in payroll actually, and I think that
Mhm.
was the best position as an intern. I think in your prior podcast, you guys were talking about internships, and I will get to that too in some of the questions. But
For sure.
yeah, that's where I started. I started right out of school in an internship. Didn't know if I was going to have a full time job after that finished, but within 3 months, I got a job, and I was running a 3,000 person payroll. And
Wow.
who'd ever guessed, right? Right out of school, 20 young, early 20s, going, oh my God, I have people in Eugene, Oregon that if I fail, they're not going to get paid.
And how did you
So I
get
started,
there?
yeah, so I'll go back to that. So for the
Yeah.
internship, I worked at Safeway, a grocery store while I was in school, put myself
Yep.
through school. And then lady came in and said they were looking for an accounting slash IT person. And here I'm young, hungry, and I'm like, oh, I could do IT. And so I joined their little company. It was a nonprofit that I joined, but I again gamble on myself. So I gambled on myself instead of got into that position and learned, the accounting end and learned the IT end, and then from there, uh, got my next job. Well, actually, that's when I got my internship. So
Right.
once I got that internship, because I had a little background, I was right out of school, getting ready to graduate. They offered it to me, and I thought I won the World Series, man. I was like, yes, I secured it, right?
Yeah.
Once I got that, I was like working my butt off. Do you need coffee? I'll go get you coffee.
Yeah.
What do you need?
Yeah.
Right. So lucky enough, they bought into my spirit, I would say.
Right.
They saw I was hungry, young, energetic, and willing to do what it takes, and
Yeah.
got in there, and like I said, in 3 months,
Mhm.
got a full-time job out of it. So
Yeah, that's awesome. And you think those values still hold true, right? Getting internships, like what would you tell the younger generation the importance of those?
absolutely. I had a nephew that went to UC Santa Barbara, and I kept telling him, get an internship, get an internship. Because once you get out of school, now you have a background. Now you have something on your resume. You have some industry experience. I definitely believe, and actually at the company I'm at now, we're instituting an internship program
Oh
that they never
wow.
had. Yeah, and that's something that if I leave there in a few years, in 10 years, 12 years, hopefully, that'll be a legacy I have, right?
Yeah.
Starting that program. So that's something that I truly believe in wholeheartedly, and think that's your foot in the door.
Yeah.
Got to start somewhere, as I say.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree with that. So you get this full-time role and then what are you thinking? Just go in there and just hustle, essentially?
Hustle. I put like I said, axe to the grind. I guess they say. I try to learn from everybody around me. Ask questions. I sometimes you got to pick and choose when those questions, but when the opportunity arises, you need to take it. Ask those questions from the leadership. Became best friends with the corporate controller there, right? So
Right.
that business was like a $900 million business. I'm good friends going water skiing with the controller and
Yeah.
asking him questions on our downtime, going golfing, what have you. And then that led to my next role. My next
Mhm.
role as a fixed asset accountant, which then became an accounting manager. And then it's just those little opportunities. I
Mhm.
never stopped taking those opportunities, because
Yeah.
if they're presented, you have to, right? And that's, to me, people might say I'm lucky given my background coming from a not so great home, or
Yeah.
uh, uh, but when I saw those opportunities, I took them. I never screwed anybody out of those opportunities. I was always, that's what I can always say, is I can look back and say I did it the right way. And,
Yeah.
but that's where luck, that's what say where luck it comes from, right? It's where
Exactly.
opportunity and hard work meet. And I can honestly say that's what's happened in my career. I've
That's
had those
awesome.
opportunities. Yeah.
Yeah. And you mentioned, I know you said earlier, like getting coffee and you said going on a ski trip with the corporate controller. Do you think
Yep.
that's more on the EQ side as well?
Yeah, absolutely. There's like even at G3 Gallo Wines, right? We'd have wine Wednesdays, or we'd have
Mhm.
uh, people get invited out to have cigars, and I love cigars, but I know people that don't were there,
Yeah.
and I thought, hey, good for you.
Yeah.
You're creating that opportunity. So once you get into whether it's around, I don't know, they don't call it anymore, but they call it, around the water cooler, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
Talking in between meetings,
Yeah.
just starting that rapport. That's when you really start understanding people. And
Right.
again, the psychology for me is a big part of business. It's getting people to grow the art with you, right? It's getting them to understand, right, what's the goal. And I don't really know the psychology until you get to know the people.
Right. Right. Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
So let's fast forward a little bit. Thank you for that. That's great.
Yeah.
So going on your career, because you've had a successful career so far, can you talk about some hardships or just setbacks in your career?
You know, I've, like I said, I've kind of had those opportunities.
Yeah.
It's a blessed life
Yeah.
that I've had things that happen that just really I had to question, example was, I found a multi-million dollar fraud in a company that we were merging. We
Wow.
just got bought. We were going to merge with another company. And here I go. I was a stock administrator at the time for the
Right.
company, and I find this multi-million dollar fraud, and I was freaking out. Who do I trust? Who can I confide in? I didn't know if I could trust my boss or her boss or the
Yeah.
boss above him. And finally, I went to them and told them, showed them all the paperwork, what I found, some of the stealing going on with stock options, and I questioned myself, did I do the right thing?
Right.
But as an accountant, as a financial person, I had to put my big boy pants on and do the right thing, and basically uh, uh, show everything that I had in terms of proof. And I psychologically, though, man, I was a mess. I was
Yeah.
like, I destroyed a person's career. I can't believe they would do this, blah blah blah,
Yeah.
and that really freaked me out a little.
Yeah.
But once everything chips fell and everything, person was prosecuted. I met with FBI and some stock
Wow.
exchange people, and some of one guy had a gun. I'm like, what the hell did I get myself into?
Sounds
Right?
like a
It was
Netflix series.
yeah, it was crazy. So for me, that kind of I don't say faith in humanity, but it got me to think, okay, I am doing the right thing. I am on
Right.
the right path. I'm a fiduciary of this business. So I took my job serious, and it
Yeah.
just reinforced that, yes, I can do this. Yes, I know what I'm
Yeah.
doing. I'm not the one that committed the fraud.
Exactly.
I just happened to find it, and part of that was the guy I was jet skiing with, my controller. He challenged me and said, "I know you can figure this out. Figure it out." And I figured it out and found out there was fraud behind it. So
Right. And how do you deal with that? I feel like it's a lot of stress. Like, how do you keep a clear mind going through something like that? I know it's anonymly, but just in general,
yeah,
you know.
well, it's stress in general, right? That's in high level jobs, even finance roles, right? You're presenting things, you're finding things,
Mhm.
um, you're finding trends, and maybe some trends point out some things. Now you got to be the bearer of bad news, right? I find that for me, being true to yourself and being true to the messaging it gets me through the workday. Outside of that, I play just as hard.
Yeah.
I have a friend group that I can trust, and we talk a lot. We share stories. They have their own little war stories, and I have my little war stories, and it makes me human again. It makes me feel like, okay, I'm with people. I'm not
Yeah.
with a title. I'm not with Joe finance guy
Yeah.
or Jim purchasing guy. I'm with my friends, and that's what keeps me kind of grounded and less stress. And when the Warriors were actually winning back 3 years ago, we'd have Warrior parties, and so we'd be eager to get home on a Wednesday, or right. But
Yeah.
Not so much anymore, but
No, ship has sailed.
right. Absolutely. So that actually hit rocks.
Yeah. Want to take a step back. I heard you mentioning through this merging. So have you worked? So you have experience in M&A as well.
Yeah.
The
Yep.
reason why
Um,
I love mergers acquisitions. So I just want to hear your piece about that.
oh, I do too. I've been through several of them. I've been on the acquiree side. I've been on the acquirer side.
Yeah.
And it could be fun and it could be scary for people. I've built my career on change management, so I'm a big change agent. I love change. I believe if you're not getting better, you're getting worse.
Yeah.
Um, there's no such thing as being stagnant. So doing M&As, I've been on the due diligence side where we've kind of had to figure out things and seeing, is the value worth it? If not, what's the discount value? And then are we going to pay goodwill?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I've been through several of those, and my experience with those has been fun. I've made it fun because it's like I'm a kid in a candy store. I'm learning about someone else's business. I'm learning about how we're going to integrate the two. What are the key things we need to know? When it comes with personnel, who are the key personnel? Who do I need to get to know? And again, that psychology thing. How do I get them on our team, right? Because at the end of the day, we're one team, especially whether you're a merger or an acquisition, right? We're one team. There was one acquisition or actually merger I was part of, where again I was in payroll, and the production floor people got mispaid because I went to a new company. And they called me back to consult. And when I came back, I had people patting me on the back, and I'm like, I don't even know you people. I mean, I know your name, but I've never seen you, right? Right. So to me, again, pride, confidence, it's made me feel like, man, I'm doing a good job. These people entrusting their people to me, And so I've seen it at that ground level, and I've seen it at an executive level where we had to make decisions for how are we going to do this? It's not affordable, like I said, short discount it, what have you. So I try to take human aspects of any type of those decisions. And nowadays it's gotten easier and easier for me because going through, I think I've done 4 of them. It's allowed me to know, to again, anticipate, see around the corner, and then ask those questions that need to be asked. Because sometimes, as you know, you get in it and the numbers are like, hey, these numbers aren't exactly what I thought they were.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but you dig a little and you find, oh, okay, now I understand what's happening or what they did, and but for me, it's a top to bottom evaluation, right?
Yeah.
And we got to figure it out.
Gotcha. And from a technical standpoint, is really for education purposes. What are the different types of valuations, if you kind of high level view? What are you guys looking at essentially?
I look at cash flows, number
Okay.
one, and number two, I look at because it depends on the type of acquisition. Is it a public company? Is it a private company? Private companies usually have, I call, skeletons in the closet, right? So my job is to kind of figure that out with the team over, okay, what are those? Because we need to put a value on it. Meaning, are those going to come with us or are those staying over there, right? So, and then you do your earnings. Are we going to 10 times earnings, 6 times earnings? Like, how are we going to value that, right? And part of that is looking at market conditions, looking at the full scope of what are we doing this acquisition for, right? I know some acquisitions people know, hey, we don't need to bring the admin group over. We're going to cut that out because we have our own team. Where I always go, hold on, who's going to do volume of the work went up? So are we staffed right? Are we going to be able to? So, and all that has to be taken into account. There's just a whole view of what exactly are we buying? Why are we buying? And should we?
Right. Gotcha.
Right.
Gotcha. Yeah, it all makes sense. Yeah, thank you for talking about that.
Yeah.
I want to switch over, kind of skip forward. What are your thoughts on? Because I know this podcast is focused on bringing diversity into finance and awareness. So essentially, like, what are your thoughts on the importance of diversity, and particularly in our industry?
Yeah, I think diversity is imperative. I think, just like the human DNA. the more diverse the DNA is, the stronger it is. Because you get different views, you get different backgrounds. And again, I'll keep going back to this. It's the psychology. How are we going to make it all work?
Yeah.
Because, you know, I don't know if you read, I'm a big business book reader. I read a lot about business leaders, get their perception. And the ones that I agree with most and that I align with are the ones that have the, excuse my language, but the pain in the ass on the other side of the room, asking
Yeah.
those pain in the ass questions, right? I
Right.
need that. I need that person looking behind my six to make sure that we get the full 60 view of what we're getting into, right? And
Right.
you know, I think diversity is part of it. Everyone's coming with different backgrounds, different ethnicities, different
Mhm.
perceptions, and to me, that's what makes a business stronger. We're only stronger as our weakest link, right? And
Right.
if we're all uh, homogenous, then we're not going to get anywhere, right?
Yeah.
We have to have different views. We got to
Right.
see different sides to it.
Right. And what advice would you give to young minorities, professionals who are inspired to start a career in finance?
Yeah, you know, like I told you before, I heard your guys' podcast about internships, right? You got
Yeah.
to start at ground level. Be hungry. Ask questions. Don't be annoying, but ask questions, right? Know when to ask them and study it. You know, I had a girlfriend in college that I had ordered the Wall Street Journal, and she had said, you know, first of all, you can't afford it, you're broke. Second, like, can you even read this? And I'm like,
Yeah.
no, but one day I will. Now I can read that thing. I
Yeah.
know front to back, top to bottom. I know exactly what's in there, how to read it, what I can interpret it. So you got to start somewhere, and you got to believe in yourself, and you got to again find those opportunities. And they're not going to come for you. You got to go to it. Um, so for me, it's like starting at an internship, whether it's your freshman year, your sophomore year, your junior year. You got to start somewhere.
Right.
Don't be scared too. Like I told you, I suffered from imposter syndrome, right? I don't sometimes I get into a room, I'm like, man, there's a lot of smart people in here. And
Yeah.
then at the end of the day, I'm the one asking the question that no one wants to
Right.
ask. And I'm like, okay, cool. But then I learn from it. And usually
Right.
the feedback I get from leadership is, man, I'm glad you asked that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because sometimes that's what they're looking for. They're looking for that one person that wants to ask, that not wants to, but that is willing to ask the tough questions. And
Right.
for me, it's been God sent to be able to do that. And that's the advice I'd give to anyone. Don't be
Yeah.
scared. Don't be afraid to do it.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. And how do you like random question? How's your career as a CFO? How do you enjoy it? Or
You
what do you
know,
do?
I was thinking about, you know, self-reflecting. I do that a lot. I I like it. I like every time I'm in a middle tier management job, I get frustrated because you always think, oh, I could do that better. Oh, I wish I was there because I do this better, right?
Yeah.
Well, now I'm that guy.
Yeah.
So I'm that guy, and I'm sure people critique me, but at the end of the day, you know I'm making the best decision for the business and
Yeah.
for the employees, right? Because that's what I take pride in, and that's what I outweigh, you know, the goods and the bads. And for me, I love it. That's part of getting people motivated, and I believe that it takes communication, right? You got
Mhm.
to have your team meetings, your staff meetings, and get them to understand why we're doing something. You know, and half the time I'm getting people to buy in, right? It's
Right.
listening to them and then implementing some of their things that they're bringing up and it makes them buy into the whole process. And
Yeah.
for me, being that leader has really uh, I take a lot of pride in,
Yeah.
and it makes me whole again. Again, there's pressures with it, but it's really it's everything I thought it would be.
Yeah. And do you think this is the most fun you've had so far in your career?
Yeah, you know, looking back, it's kind of like the journey, right? The
Yeah.
journey was the funnest part for me, meeting different people, meeting different leaders. You know, I'll tell you a story when I was in high tech. We used to make the thin film discs that your data used to be writing on the computer drive.
Oh wow.
Nowadays, they're the hard drives, right? Now they're the SCSI, or not SCSI, the flash drives, right?
Yeah.
That are
Yeah.
in your
Yeah.
computer. So they're static. But so we were making those 15 film discs, and then I was leaving to go to a startup because at the time it was at the middle 2000s. So that's when web companies were just coming out, and it was the hotbed. And so I was going to go leave to a company like that. Well, the COO pulls me in, and he's asking me like, why am I leaving? And I'm like, well, I'm like a nobody. Why the hell am I in your office, right? He's like, well, we heard good things about you, and I just want to to see why we're losing good people. And he said, you need to stay because we're making these little platters, these little discs that fit into a little box that you're going to be able to hear music and you're going to be able to see pictures and photos and videos. And I'm like, now hindsight, he was talking about the iPod. I'm
Wow.
like, oh my gosh, like no idea, right?
Yeah.
And he said, I can't tell you. A lot of it's confidential. It's
Yeah.
proprietary stuff, but now hindsight, I think 5 years after I left, and then they introduced the iPod in Cupertino down the street, I was blown away. Like, oh my god, what did I do?
Yeah. It all works out.
Yeah, yeah. But then I went into work for the web companies, and there I thought we were going to be gazillionaires or startups
Yeah.
and all that stuff, and then but that was fun too. Learning how to build a business from the ground up and go to Series A, Series B, Series C, and we were in the middle of Series C, and then the web just crashed. The whole dot bomb, as they called it back then. But
So you're right
yeah,
in the
that
meat of
was fun times. Yeah, and that's what I said. It's those were the fun times of just getting in and learning, and we're all paddling our boat the same direction. That
it.
was hindsight's 2020, right? I look back and I'm like, well, that was probably one of my funnest times,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I assume that's the most you learn, right? Just going through that.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm providing slide deck for the board meeting, which is Sequoia Capital, all these big players that are funding eBay and Google and all these things nowadays. Now these big giant companies now, but back then, who
Yeah.
knew, right?
Yeah. So I know you talk how you read the Wall Street Journal and everything. What are your thoughts on the current state of the market?
Oh,
Well,
it's definitely tough. Definitely a tough economy. I think it's the headwinds are pretty strong right now. The value of the dollar, as you know, being a financial guy, has nothing to go but down.
yeah.
So it's going to get tougher, I think. Not to be a Debbie Downer, I think there will be opportunities with that. We're also fighting the tariffs 100% on EVs from China. Like, so time to batten down the hatches. Things are going to get a little tougher, I think. But,
Yeah.
the major thing I would say is cash is king. I heard it on your other podcast.
Yeah.
Cash is king.
Cash
And,
is king.
when we were going through the web .com, my CFO at the time, Colleen, she had told me the same thing. You know what, Gordon? We can ride this out. We got acquired, by the way, after that. But she told me we could ride this out. We have enough cash. We just got to get to the
Hmm.
the end of the race here. And
Yeah.
and she was right, man. Cash is king. I lived off that for 25 plus years of my career,
Yeah.
and it's never did me wrong.
Yeah. So what advice would you give to investors? Just cash is king typically right now? Or just
Yeah, I mean, might be time to hold back just to see where things settle. Real
yeah.
estate ain't doing great because the rates are too high. Things are, might be. I know in my industry right now, in the walnut and almond industry, the farms aren't doing so well. There might be opportunities for acquisitions there because we are lower value.
Yeah.
China's came into the market and decimated that whole industry. But inferior product. So I think there's a pendulum that's going to swing back.
Yeah.
So it might be time to find those values, right?
Right. Right. And actually, on with that, can you talk about before you wrap up, actually your company that you're at right now? I think it's pretty interesting. Just talk
Yeah,
about your industry that you're in. It's just very niche. Actually never heard anything about it.
yeah, no worries. So yeah, walnut industry I'm in. We do some almond processing too. Company started 20 years ago. They were farmers out in California here, and basically did a vertical integration. So now we package, we roast, we send out. We do 70% of our business is export. I don't know if people know much about the walnut industry. I did it. I surely didn't, but it's California provides half of the world's walnuts. globally essentially. And number one is China, which wasn't the case 7, 8 years ago. Um, United States, primarily California, and then third is Chile. And but it's a big market. 800,000 tons of walnuts gets sold out of California. So that means we're about, and since we're 50%, almost 50%, it's basically uh, two 2 million tons are sold globally, which is a lot of walnuts. Let me tell you.
Are there any publicly traded companies in this industry?
There's a few. I think Crane is one of them. I'm not sure Blue Diamond's a co-op, but they do more almonds. But yeah, there's some power players. There's some
Gotcha.
big movers in that business. Anywhere from like 800 million to 500 million, right? Those are the big ones in our considered industry. We're probably like the top five in California.
Yeah.
So we do a lot of volume. We're at a point where they grew so fast, so soon that we're just trying to get our bearings
Yeah.
and make sure that we have our processes together so we can do that next step, basically go that next level. And we're highly automated. We're probably one of the most highly automated. And what I mean by that is, so when you pick a walnut and you bring it into our facility,
Mhm.
um, we put it in machines that get, they dump the walnuts, they crack them, we crack the walnut shells, and then they get sorted all by lasers, and then they get produced on our packaging line. So we have like, in terms of sorting, we only have like 8 sorters or 8 to 12, depending on volume, but the most of it's done through automation and machinery. So it's
Yeah.
something we're looking to exploit and be the key leader in that. We're like I said, we're highly integrated, and so I think we have opportunities here in the future. Once we kind of take a breath, get all the little kinks worked out, I mean, the sky's the limit for us. So
That's awesome. That's gonna be fun.
yeah,
Sounds fun.
yeah,
So
yeah. Again, right? It's when it's all the chaos and I'm learning and I'm figuring things out. Then
yeah.
I look back and say, man, that was the funnest time, right?
Yeah. Who knows? So what's your ultimate goal in the next 10 years? I feel like you've done a lot. CFO, um,
Yeah,
you know,
payroll,
yeah,
accounting,
didn't come from a
right,
lot humble background. Just
right.
where do you see, like what's your goal over the next decade or so?
Honestly, I want to first retire, maybe not retire. I never saw myself retiring. I love, so the athlete I was in high school, I'm now the athlete in business and getting that done. For me, it's probably hopefully having a business, nothing large scale, of course, something that's going to pay my benefits when I retire.
Yeah.
And honestly, I do want to teach. I went to junior college, and one of the things I want to do is probably teach at a junior college,
That's awesome.
because that's where I learned about the world, I guess you could
Mhm.
say.
And what would you teach exactly? Finance or
Probably
economics? Yeah.
accounting, finance, anything
Yeah.
of that field and related. I know, going back to giving advice to minorities and stuff, being that person that I'm their gateway to that next step in their path, to me is exciting. And that's something I love to give back. And I love to host seminars and get them to kind of just brain drain of what I've learned, right? Leave my legacy on these people. My legacy doesn't live on the statue, it lives in people.
Yeah.
And for me, doing that is going to be the biggest reward I think I have, because I love teaching. I did a teaching stint for a summer intern, like a before you get into an internship program. It's called Citywide, I think it's called. They
Mhm.
had it in Silicon Valley there, and I had a friend ask me to teach one class, and yeah, I had to do a scenario with them. And after the class, I had a lot of these kids come up to me, or students come up to me, and tell me they were the best part of the whole program this whole
Oh
summer, and
wow.
it made me feel good, right? Because
Yeah.
because in doing these case studies, I challenged them.
Yeah.
And one of them was having some morals and doing the right thing in your business, and it was at Google, matter of fact. And I told them, okay, say you're working at Google and you're morally challenged of turning this person in, or looking the other way, what would you do? But you're working at Google. You don't want to lose
Yeah.
your career. You don't want a bad reputation, right? And a lot of them were like, that would never happen. So then I told them my story about the fraud story,
Yeah.
and it blew them away. They were just like, wow, that could happen.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's like that's what kind of it's always been in the back of my mind. That's what I want to do. I think I have some history and knowledge to give and share, and if I could give it to that person early in their career versus me learning later or middle of my career, then that's the way to go. I would love to do that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well,
Yeah.
Gordon, it's been great. So, any last words of wisdom that you would tell your younger self?
Yeah, I heard in your other podcast, obviously I follow you.
Thank
You
you.
know, is don't be afraid, right? You have to walk through that door. Like I said, I had imposter syndrome, I think, for most of my life, and until I get into those situations, and then I figure out, man, I can do this, and you can too. You just got to figure it out. And if you're driven, if you're hungry, I read a book from Rick Pitino. He used to be the coach of Kentucky. I don't know where he's at now, but
Ah,
he said he used to look for people with PhDs. P meaning
wow.
poor in terms of knowledge. Um, H meaning hungry. They just don't have that knowledge, but they're hungry to seek it, right? And D, they're determined. PhD. And for me, I kind of model myself to be that way, right? And I think anyone could do it. It's not luck. It's just hard work, putting your nose to the grind and getting it done, and having that vision and going and do it, right?
Yeah, gotcha. Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you hopping on. It's been great.
Yes, sir. Thank you for everything.
Yeah, thank you.